I'm going to talk through some of these bits and pieces as we go through this talk. And this will transmit a signal out that's got encoded in it your identity, frequency 5,000 miles plus. It has the ability for a radar signal. And if any vessel comes close to your position, this is just fantastic. When you're in a busy area, if you are crossing, you can put a regular mobile phone in there and it converts your mobile phone into a sat phone. I'm going to talk to you about communications. See, it's one of my specialist areas, I suppose. And it's one of the areas I think that's changing rapidly. Communications generally across the world are moving forward at great pace. And so it's something that is changing on a sort of a monthly basis. So I thought I'd talk about the sort of the devices you've got available to you when you are on your vessel at sea. And I thought I'd kick off. I remember when I started sailing too long ago, really, and pretty much the only equipment we had aboard our vessels was a VHF radio. And for the older members watching this, I have to show this was my ultimate favorite sailor VHF radio. This was a classic of its time, probably in the 70s. A massive, chunky thing, but it was a mainstay of VHF communications from small boats up to big ships. Very simple buttons, nice and clunky. I love this thing to bits. You see those great big handles on them. I'm sure that was to hold on to in a heavy sea to keep upright. But that's what I started with back in the day. The other picture I wanted to show you was this one, just really to make you realize how lucky you are, because when I did my Yachtmaster theory all those years ago, I had to learn all the international code flags, and I had to learn Morse code, which thankfully we don't have to do anymore. Okay, so communications at sea. I've kind of broken this down up into two areas. One is safety equipment we can carry, and one is general communications. When it comes to safety, I'm talking about this thing. Some of you will well have heard of GMDSS, and this is about safety equipment that you would find on a sea. And we're going to talk a bit more about that, including some of this equipment, VHF, SATCOMs, EPIRBs, and some of you will have heard of some of this equipment. Some might be new to you. And I'm also going to talk about general communications. This has really taken off now with sat phones and other devices. So it's becoming more and more popular for communicating at sea. So safety equipment, GMDSS, why do we carry it? Well, this really is for our safety. If we have any issues, if we have any problems, if we have any breakdowns, maybe we need some medical advice, maybe we have a problem like a fire, then this is where GMDSS comes in, when we can call for help from the Coast Guard. General communications is something we never really used to do. We were wholly reliant on VHF radios. But now, of course, with the advent of the mobile phone and other devices, and now we can stay in touch with our friends and family. And there are these days, we can keep up with our social media, download pictures and stream videos, all sorts. There is the technologies there available to us now. But let's kick off firstly with safety. I mentioned this thing, GMDSS. So what is it? That's what it stands for, Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. And this is all really about distress. It's what to do if you are in trouble. And this actually goes really right back to the sinking of the Titanic, when many people lost their lives. And after that big disaster, the all world came together maritime world in the form of the International Maritime Organization, and they tried to come up with a system for safety at sea. Because back in those days, if you were in distress, you were wholly reliant on the hope that there would be vessels close to your position to help you. And in the 70s, we started putting up satellite communications, and the idea was formed that we could have a system that wherever you were in the world, whatever vessel you were in, if you were in trouble, you could call for help and you could contact a coast station directly. And that is where GMDSS came from. And it came live in 1999. So it's been around for a while now. So what does it involve? Well, here's my little list of equipment. So I'm going to talk through some of these bits and pieces as we go through this talk. Some will you be familiar with, like the VHF radio, I'm sure, and the EPIRBs. Others might be new to you. Just perhaps is a good point to mention that at some point in your studying, probably you will be learning about GMDSS and VHF radio. Certainly it's in the day skipper course, it's in the Yachtmaster and the fast track. And also just be aware that when you, or if and when you go on to do your Yachtmaster practical, it's a prerequisite that you must hold a VHF SRC license before you can take the exam. And indeed, you have to have a license also to operate this equipment as well. So the first thing I just wanted to show you about the GMDS area is the world is mapped up into 4 areas. And depending where you sail, you will use different equipment. So here's our first piece of equipment. This is Area A1. This will apply to most of you, I'm sure, where you are within range of a VHF DSC coast station. I say approximately 30 to 40 miles. With VHF, it's what's called line of sight. But most of us, this is what we're using for our communications when we're close to land. If you're going a bit further offshore, you want to communicate over a bigger distance, then we move into this Sea Area A2. And that's within range of an MF, that's medium frequency radio. And I've got, again, approximately 250 miles. Now we're going into deep ocean. This is Sea Area A3. That's the pale blue. And the category changes slightly. It says within range of a satellite communication system. And we'll talk about those in a little bit. And I've got mostly worldwide. And you'll see why in a moment. Finally, Sea Area 4 is the polar region. So whereas A3 kind of covers up to the high latitudes, there the polar regions are excluded because the satellites are unable to communicate that high up. And we have therefore the polar regions, that is Area A4. And so depending where you actually say your vessel, A1, A2, A3, A4, there's an expectation that you will carry certain equipment. And this is probably the bit that's most familiar to us, local sailing, Sea Area A1, up to 30 to 40 miles. And there's an expectation that we will carry a VHF DSC radio. And I'll talk to you about DSC in a moment. But probably most of the boats, in fact, I'm sure all the boats you go on will have a VHF radio of some description aboard it. It is the most commonest piece of equipment you'd find. Some of your vessels may have an EPIRB. I have an EPIRB on my vessel. That is a device for calling for assistance. There's a device called a SART, Search and Rescue Radar Transponder. And finally, Navtex. Again, some of your vessels may well have Navtex on them, and that is for receiving safety information from the Coast Guard. What I'm talking about here, it might not relate directly to us, but this is, if you are a commercial vessel, this is mandatory fit. So if you are a vessel that takes fare-paying people, you must carry this equipment. But of course, if you have your own vessel, then it's up to you what you would fit, though I would expect that most vessels probably would be carrying most of this equipment. If we're going further offshore, out into Sea Area 2, then of course we're expected to carry the A1 equipment, the VHF, the EPIRB, the SART, and the Navtex. But then we'd also be expected to carry an MF medium frequency radio as well. And that will give us communications up to about 250 miles. For those of you who are going further afield, maybe looking at doing Atlantic crossing, world circuit, you'll be going deep ocean. And deep ocean, Sierra 3, you're carrying the equipment for area A1 and A2. And then we have a sort of a choice of either using HF high frequency radio or satellite communications, one of those two devices. And SATCOMs has always been sort of out of the pocket of most of us leisure sailors, but prices really have come down. And as you'll see later on, we can get these devices for our quite small vessels. Sierra 4, within the regulations, they tell us if we are in the high latitude areas, then the only piece of equipment that we've got available to us is going to be an HF radio, high frequency radio. Not so many vessels do work up at the high latitudes, but I guess Antarctica is becoming more and more popular. There are plenty of cruise ships and indeed quite small yachts cruising down the Antarctic region, and they might well be carrying HF radio for the communications. Now, as I've mentioned, things have moved on quite rapidly, and literally in this last year and a bit, this is the new kid on the block. I should be a salesman for their Iridium. This is a new piece of kit run using the Iridium satellites, and its big selling point is with this one device, you can communicate areas A1, 2, 3, and 4. So a complete global system for communications. And the price of this has come down a lot. And I'd say typically maybe £3,000 to £4,000, which I know is a lot of money. But then if you've bought yourself a 40 or 50 foot yacht, £100,000, then maybe to have a communications device like this that gives you worldwide communications is something you're interested in. So I just want to run you quickly through the sort of equipment you can have. I'm not trying to duplicate the VHF SRC course, but I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview about the equipment that we might be expected to carry. And we're going to kick off with the VHF. This is something you will be familiar, I'm sure. Very high frequency, standard piece of equipment. Typical range 40 to 50 miles. It's line of sight. So basically, the higher up the antenna, the further the range. If you are on a sailing boat with a sort of a 30 or 40 foot mast, you'll have a bigger range than maybe a smaller motorboat. If you've got a handheld VHF radio, you're probably talking of maybe only 5 or 6 miles. Just be aware from the licensing point of view that there are 2 licenses required for you to use this equipment. One is for the boat. So if you have a boat and you fit this equipment on it, you will be required to have a license for that. Quite remarkably, I think when I bought my license 20 years ago, it was £20. And the year after that, it went free. So actually, there is no cost for you to get a license for your vessel. The other license is the operator license, and this is the one that you will have to do. This is what's called the VHF SRC short range course. And this is a 1-day course that you can do either online or at your local RYA sailing school. I mentioned DSC, digital selective calling, and this is the big game changer, really, that on the front of your VHF radios, and in fact all radios produced since 1999 actually have got this big red distress button on the front of it, and that is for a calling system. And so if you've got this equipment fitted on your vessel, if you are in distress, then you can open this flap and press the button. The equipment varies 3 to 5 seconds, and this will transmit a signal out that's got encoded in it your identity, your position, the date and time, and optionally what is wrong with you. And this signal will go out and will be picked up by every other vessel within range that's got this equipment. And in these days, all vessels are fitted with DSC radios. So all vessels within 30 to 40 miles will know you're in distress. And more importantly, of course, the Coast Guard will know that you are in distress. They'll know who you are and they will know where you are. So this has been a bit of a game changer for dealing with problems on your vessel. If you are going further offshore, you might choose to have MFHF radio. It's quite old technology, but it is pretty good and pretty reliable. SSB is generic term. It stands for single sideband. I'm not going to try and explain why it's called SSB now, but it's something you might learn in the course. And it has the ability to transmit and receive on MF medium frequency and HF high frequency. If you're transmitting on medium frequency, you typically get 250 miles range. High frequency, 5,000 miles plus. It has the ability to bounce radio waves around the world, and you can talk to somebody thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away. One of the nice things about SSB, if you have one on your vessel, don't chuck it away or get rid of it, because though you actually do need a license to use it, and that is what's called the LRC, the long range course, but there is no cost to using it once you have it. And it's very popular with cruising yachts, so they can stay in contact with their friends, and they kind of have almost a daily chit chat on their radios, discussing favorite recipes and what they did in the bar last night. Okay, as opposed to our satellite communications, where you will be paying for the privilege of using it. SART, I mentioned that briefly. SART is something called a search and rescue radar transponder, and this comes in two flavors. The one on the left is a traditional SART. It works using the same frequency as X-band radar. Now, many vessels are fitted with radar these days. And the idea of the SART means that when you switch this on, it listens for a radar signal. And if any vessel comes close to your position, then the SART will activate and it pings a little message back that you'd see on a radar screen. And the idea of this is that you would take this with you. If your vessel went down, you're sitting in the life raft, you activate it, and then the Coast Guard is able to say to all vessels in the area, please have a good look at your radar screen and look out for the signal that is a SART, and we'll find a casualty. And it enables the Coast Guard to use any vessel with radar, and quite small vessels are fitted now. Even my boat's got a little radar set on it, so it's quite commonplace. It's not just for big ships. This is quite old technology. You'll see on the right-hand side, we've got this thing called an AIS SART. This is using AIS technology. AIS technology. For those who are familiar with that, I'll talk briefly about this in a moment, but it means if you have one of these, then you will see your signature on an AIS screen, so in the chart plotter screen. This is actually quite a small device, and you will find many boats, especially racing boat crews, sailing boat, race boats, they will often make sure that every member of the crew has one of these little tiny AIS SARTs. You can slip it in your pocket, and if a crew member falls over the side, they can activate that, and they're quickly picked up and rescued. Satellite communications now. There are two big players. It used to be a company called Inmarsat, that stood for International Maritime Satellite, and they produced these two bits of kit, SAT-C and Fleet Broadband. And as I've already mentioned, in this last year, we now have Iridium have got their GMDSS approved equipment as well. These are getting quite expensive now. You're unlikely to find them on very small boats, though a lot of the bigger racing boats will be fitted with these systems. Subtle difference between the two. SAT-C is kind of poor man's satellite communications. It is text only, so you can't actually talk to anybody, but you can send them text messages, send emails. And you can probably see there's a big red distress button on the front of the screen. So again, you can use it to call for help if you need to. Fleet broadband is now, this is getting quite expensive. The fleet broadband system has got the ability to download quite a lot of data. So you're using this for voice communication and for broadband speeds. And if you have a fleet broadband, you will be able to access the internet, download weather reports. You can probably stream movies, but you'll be paying a lot of money for this sort of system. One for the super yachts. Some of your boats may well indeed have Navtex. This is slightly the slight odd one out from the equipment point of view, because this piece of kit cannot be used for calling for help. But the reason it's part of the GMDSS system is because it receives what is called MSI, that is Marine Safety Information. And basically the Coast Guard culminates lots of information from the search and rescue, from Trinity House for lighthouses, local authority with buoys at position. And this information is transmitted and picked up by a Navtex unit. And basically, if you've got one, it's sat in the corner and you switch it on and you kind of forget it. And every 4 hours, it updates itself with information pertaining to safety at sea. Works on 2 frequencies, the 518, it's a worldwide system. You'd receive that in English. And if you want, you can use the other frequency, 490, and you will get it in your local language, wherever you happen to be in the world. Okay, EPIRB, Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon. I have to say, I think this is just one brilliant bit of kit. It's been around for quite a long time. I've got lots of great books in my maritime library. Tom would be proud of me, of survival at sea, the Robertson family, Steve Callahan, who drifted across the Atlantic. They all had disasters in the sort of 70s and early 80s. Their boats sank. They were in the life raft and nobody knew there was anything wrong. And they drifted across the ocean. And luckily, they did all survive, eating fish and drinking turtle's blood and all sorts of exciting things like that. With the advent of the EPIRB, basically, if you've got one of these devices, if your boat goes down, you can take it with you into your life raft. You activate it, and this talks to a satellite, and then it comes down to a land station and is forwarded onto your local coast station. And within a matter of minutes, the Coast Guard will know who you are. They have your identity. They know where you are because this is transmitting your position, and they know that you are in distress. And so this works worldwide, everywhere in the world. If you activate an EPIRB, the rescue authorities will know that you are in trouble, and they will then redirect other vessels to your position. And you would expect, I would like to think, maybe within 24 hours, you would be picked up. Fantastic bit of kit. Prices dropped and dropped and dropped, and I think the last time I looked at an EPIRB, it's about £300, which I think is a pretty good deal for such a vital piece of kit. And I have it even for my coastal boat, even though maybe my other equipment will be doing the job. I just like the idea that I've got my EPIRB just in case the boat goes down. I just chucked this in. This is not really about specific marine communications, but when we're talking about sort of this really nice modern electronic goodies you can have on your boat, and I think this actually AIS is sort of the latest big thing. I say latest, it's been around there for 20 years, but this was a real game changer and came from the aircraft industry. Automatic identification system. Some of your vessels, I'm sure, will have got AIS on them. And fundamentally, you've got your chart plotter. On your chart plotter, you've got your vessel, so you can see exactly where you are. And the AIS then shows you the position of all the vessels around you. And you can click on each of these vessels, and it tells you lots of useful information, like the name of the vessel. It gives you the unique identification, so you can call them up on the radio if needs be. And from my point of view, the 2 very important things you'll see on the screen here, this thing called CPA, closest point of approach, in this case 0.8 of a nautical mile, and TCPA, time to the closest point of approach, 5 minutes and 27 seconds. And this is just fantastic. When you're in a busy area, if you are crossing the traffic separation scheme and you've got ships coming at you at 15 to 20 knots, there could be 10, 20 ships out there, then in the old days, you would be out there with a hand-bearing compass trying to take bearings on these ships. trying to work on if they're in a collision situation. Well, AIS is doing this work for you, and I have to say it's absolutely invaluable to have this bit of kit that's showing you what these vessels are doing and how close they are going to get to you. I started off with an AIS receiver only, which actually is integrated into my radio. So my VHF radio has got an AIS display, and I can actually see the targets coming towards me, and I can interrogate the radio, and it tells me things like the CPA and the TCPA. So I think this is it's a fabulous bit of kit. So definitely recommend it. I'm going to come back to that just in a second, but I want to move on to the next thing I just want to mention to you, and that is radar. And radar really is, again, I think it's a very, very important piece of equipment. And I tell you why. When I bought my vessel 20 years ago, I had a shopping list, don't we all? And at the very top of my list was radar above anything else. In fact, I don't actually have a chart plotter on my boat. And I didn't think that a chart plotter was essential for me because I knew how to navigate, because I'd done my day skipper and my Yachtmaster theory course. But the radar does the one thing that you cannot do, and it can see in the fog. And that is why I think it's such an important bit of kit, because it is able to see things. And if you get caught out in fog, poor visibility, it can be pretty scary, especially if you are in a busy area like the traffic separation scheme. And so having radar means that you can see other vessels. Now, just worth mentioning as well, radar works by bouncing signals off big solid objects. It likes land, it likes ships, it likes big metal buoys. It doesn't really like little fiberglass boats or wooden boats. We're almost invisible to radar. And so that's why they always recommend, if we are in a small boat, a non-metal boat, that we put up a radar reflector, which is usually a bits of aluminium. And the idea is they will bounce the signal back and we would be visible on radar. But please do not kid yourself. These little radar reflectors are not very effective at all. I mean, they are better than nothing, but don't believe because you have a radar reflector up that you will be seen. And this now goes back, and I'm just dropped back to my AIS. As I said, I've had an AIS receiver on my boat for quite a few years, which means I can see other vessels. But 2 years ago, I spent the money and I bought myself an AIS transmitter. And it means now my vessel is transmitting my identity, my position. And really, it is a super bit of safety kit, because now, as opposed to being a sort of an invisible dot on a radar screen, then my icon appears as big as a super tanker. You will clearly see my vessel and all the details about it. So from a safety point of view, I think an AIS transponder is well worth the money, and not expensive. Mine cost me £300, I think. And as soon as I put the power onto my boat, it starts transmitting, and it's transmitting my identity and my position and my speed and my course continuously. So I really recommend it. This is where things have changed quite dramatically. Only a few years ago, we were pretty much stuck with VHF, MF, and EPIRBs for distress calling. But now we've got all these kind of other devices available to us. So I just want to give a quick run through about the sort of other bits of kit that you can have, that you can use for your routine and your routine transmissions, your social media, but you can call for help as well. I we should always touch on our mobile phones. I think they are such a commonplace item. There have been plenty of rescues instigated by a mobile phone. So they're definitely a good thing. But I'm just going to stress, as always, that they're not designed specifically for safety at sea. We cannot guarantee a phone signal. Often there is, maybe up to 5 or 6 miles offshore, but often there isn't because they're not designed to work out there. So please don't just rely on your phone as your safety device, because you might find when you come to need it, there's no signal. The good side, and I always mention this, of course, is everybody's got one, or pretty much everybody's got one. And so always have it in your pocket. I've always got mine on board. And you have got the ability, if you're not too far from land, you can use things like free apps like Marine Traffic for looking at other vessels around you anyway. But yeah, don't rely on it as a bit of safety equipment. So on to our sat phones, and there's a few flavors here. Satellite phones, obviously, they work by communicating with a great multitude of satellites worldwide now. Every month there's more and more piling up into space. So I'm going to look at a couple of these. This is our Inmarsat. Now, the Inmarsat constellation is a worldwide system. They've got satellites in all sorts of orbits, even over the polar regions. And it means that you can pick up your sat phone and you can make a phone call to anybody anywhere in the world. These are quite expensive. I say they're quite expensive. I mean, prices are coming down. They used to be lots of money, but I suspect on eBay, second-hand phone, probably you can get for a few £100s. Obviously, there's the running cost, the contract, but again, these prices have come down. And there are many yachts now that are crossing oceans that will be using a sat phone for general communications, for downloading weather forecasts and for updating their blogs and whatever. So they're very, very popular. This is an Inmarsat satellite phone. This one is restricted to not working in the high latitudes, approximately 76 degrees north to 76 degrees south. So it's got a pretty good coverage, but it will not work if you are operating up in the high latitudes. So that is something to be aware of. Whereas the Iridium constellation is using a multitude of satellites, and you have got worldwide complete coverage anywhere in the world. And this is why Iridium has become so popular. Thuraya, they're now more restrictive. You can see that with the Thuraya coverage, they kind of work in Europe and Africa, Australia, but they don't work in North and South America. I'm assuming because of these restrictions, they are cheaper to run. I'm sure the contract prices are lower. And one thing I like about the Thuraya system is they have this sort of what they call a sat sleeve, where you can put a regular mobile phone in there and it converts your mobile phone into a sat phone. I don't know how effective that is, but it seems like quite a good idea and presumably a big cost saver. A Global Star, similar. It's restricted area, so this does work in North and South America, Northern or Europe, but North Africa. Again, so there are areas that it does and doesn't work. So if you're going for these slightly cheaper options, do make sure that it covers the area that you intend to be operating in. The old Iridium Go, this has been around for a few years, but this is a great little device. Many world cruising yachtsmen and women will have one of these. Basically, it's using the Iridium satellite system, and it produces a Wi-Fi hotspot on your vessel. So basically, you switch it on, and it starts communicating with the satellites, and you've got a Wi-Fi throughout the boat. Anybody who's got a phone or a tablet or a computer can link into the Wi-Fi and can download. I don't know specifically how good the speeds are. They're certainly good enough for VoIP calls and downloading general web pages. I suspect you can't stream movies with it, but it does give you that worldwide method of downloading data easily. This is an InReach Mini. I have to say, I couldn't resist it. I bought one myself, second-hand off eBay for £100, just because I thought it'd be so cool to have a satellite communication device. This is a tiny little thing, really small than a pack of cigarettes, and has the ability, it talks to the Iridium satellites, and you can text and email up to 120 characters. So it's not a lot, but it is enough to send a quick message saying everything's good, I'm having a nice time. And so it does mean that you can go off around the world and you can stay in contact with people with the little device. And it's pretty cheap. I think I got mine secondhand for £100. My monthly contract is £8 or £9. So you've got the ability, you can be mid-ocean and you can communicate with people at home. And in addition, there is a distress facility on this little box. And if you find yourself in distress, you activate it, it will patch you through to a call center, I believe, in North America. That's 24/7. They will get your details and they will then, with your position and what the situation is, pass it straight on to the search and rescue authorities. So I think it's a great little bit safety kit. And really, for the money, I think it's definitely the way forward. Now, I have to really talk about Starlink. This has really been the game changer in this last year or so. So many of the vessels I know work with are fitting Starlink onto their boats. It is pretty good. As I'm sure you know, Elon Musk has put up his huge constellation of satellites, complete world coverage, and you've got fantastic download speeds and really a pretty much guaranteed broadband connection wherever you are in the world. And again, I think prices are pretty fair. The equipment, the little antenna that you can see, there's one there, picture mounted on the back of a boat, you can get for a couple £100. I live out in the country. I've got terrible broadband where I am, and I've been looking at getting it for my home. And at the moment, prices for land-based systems about £70 a month. So it's still a bit high, but you can see that price is not so unreasonable for very good download speeds, a very good, reliable system. The Starlink got savvy that people were fitting onto their vessels, and so they've upped the prices a bit. But even so, if you fit Starlink onto your vessel as a mobile unit, again, I think price is around £250 a month, which again is a lot of money. But if you are on a big boat, if perhaps you're working from your vessel and you need reliable internet, you can use Starlink for that. And you've got these fast broadband speeds. You can stream movies, whatever. And really, so many boats I'm aware of are fitting Starlink. It's becoming really, really super popular. And just worth a quick mention, I don't know much about OneWeb. OneWeb is a similar idea to Elon Musk's Starlink. A sort of, I believe it's between the UK and India. We've got these satellites going up. It is a complete web-based system. It will be doing a very similar thing, but as opposed to Starlink, which deals directly with its own customers, OneWeb is going to be working with big companies to give access to internet worldwide. So we won't have direct access to it, but it will be doing the same sort of thing. Okay, and finally, just to finish off, just a few other gadgets that you may well be thinking about, you may have on board. On the left there are a few companies that make these MOB alarms, Moby. Worth thinking about. You can basically, if you fit one of these, then each crew member has one of these little armbands, or it can be a little pennant that you stick in the pocket of your waterproof. And the idea is that if you fall over the side of the boat, once you are more than 20 or 30 meters, then the alarms will go off. People will know that somebody's gone over the side. So it's a really good bit of safety equipment, because obviously if somebody's doing a night watch by themselves and they slip over the side of the boat, nobody's going to notice they've gone maybe for 3 or 4 hours. So with this little MOB device, then if all the crew members have got one of these things, then you will know if somebody's gone over. And I believe some people have got them. They'll put them onto their pets if you've got a pet cat or pet dog with you. And even people have attached them onto their outboard engines to stop people nicking their tender in the middle of the night. So pretty handy bit of kit. PLBs at the top now. PLBs, personal locating beacons. Pretty much, we've kind of talked about this a bit because they come in 2 flavors. They're small devices. They fit in your pocket. PLB1 works like an EPIRB, so it's transmitting a signal up to the satellites so that the Coast Guard would know that you were in the water and they would have a position, they would know where you were and that you're in distress. The other PLB would be like the SART PLB, the AIS one, which Dragon sort of mentioned the usefulness of it, that if you fall in the water and activated it, you will appear as a target on the screen of a chart plotter. And so, again, some vessels will carry these and hand them out to all the crew members as a safety device. And finally, on the bottom there, I bought one of these a few years ago, electronic flares. Flares are pretty much old-fashioned kit these days, and they're pretty dangerous. Obviously, they're big, bright, fiery things, molten lava running down your arms. The chance of you setting your boat on fire using flares is quite high. And I'm not sure, I say not sure essential. I think parachute flares still have a place to play because of the range. Of parachute flare will be visible up for maybe 30 odd miles away. But when it comes to handheld flares, these things are incredibly bright. They're using LEDs. I've got these. You can, once you've switched it on, you can see that for maybe 3 miles away. So worth having one of these on board just in case anything happens. And the one thing was, normally it will only last for maybe a couple of minutes. This, once you switched it on, you'll probably keep going for a couple of hours. So people will know that you are in distress and you need some assistance. So as I mentioned, technology is really moving on at a great speed. Pretty much every year, there are new devices coming up, especially for communications. Prices are coming down and more smaller boats are fitted with these sort of devices. And pretty much you will be able to sail across oceans and stay in contact with the rest of the world. And that really is pretty much is becoming the norm. One last picture, and that's just to say that actually sometimes we go to sailing not to want to talk to people. We want to be out there by ourselves. And so don't forget, we don't have to carry any of this kit if we don't want to. If you don't want to speak to anybody, then don't buy the equipment. Keep it all switched off and go and sail over the horizon. It's your prerogative. I'm can be quite unsociable. When I'm on a boat, I don't want to speak to anybody at all, really. So I would definitely choose not to have any of these gadgets. Yeah, but obviously, if you are commercial, of course, it becomes mandatory. You must carry them. Well, that's all from me. Thanks for coming.
Okay, Charlie, when the house bears about 270 degrees.
Information to work out our distance from the lighthouse and use that.
We might be perfectly on track, but if we're not on time...
Have a look, I've got my phone here at the effects it has on our steering compass. So our echo sound is working, we can find a contour and follow it nicely into port.
Our left hand is pointing towards the centre of the lull.